Hello, hello. Yes, that works. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good morning if you're online. Some of you may be also in the middle of the night, so good night to all of you. Welcome to the participants here and online. Welcome to this side event to the 76th World Assembly on I can. Actually, it should be I can, but I like the way that we have played with these words. And this is the initiative on climate change of nutrition, but of course we can do it. And that is an incredible message to begin with. So my name is Francesco Branca. I'm the director of the Department of Nutrition and Food Safety in the World Organization here in Geneva. And so in the next 90 minutes, I'll be your moderator. Please bear with me. And I will moderate this event on the initiative on climate change and nutrition. So we're recording this session. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome my boss, the Assistant Director General of Universal Health Coverage Healthcare Population, Dr. Li Ailan. And she will give us some introductory remarks. Dr. Li, please.
Nutrition, Gain, and Sun Movement, the AIDS Foundation, and many other partners have joined force to bring I Can into life. All partners have jointly developed the narrative, key messages, baseline data, indicators, and the targets to assess progress. This initiative seeks to catalyze, mobilize, connect, and advocate for transformative action on the critical nexus of the climate change and the nutrition. This is a win-win for the health of people and the planet, and achieve both goals more effectively. I thank the government of Egypt for your wonderful leadership to convene us and highlight this critical connection. Today, we will learn more about what I Can is and is not. We will hear from countries to recognize what they have done, are doing, and what they plan to do in this initiative. We will also know more about the connection between I Can and another new initiative we call Alliance for Transformative Action for Climate and Action, also well known as ATTACH. I'm learning about a lot of new names, but not unfamiliar, very good. WHO served as secretariat of ATTACH, which was initially created by United Kingdom and Egypt again for your leadership as the president of COP26 and the COP27 respectively. In fact, I Can will be an ATTACH working group co-chaired by Egypt again, and also the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, well known as GAIN. Thank you very much for that. Member states will certainly be interested in this new initiative, I Can. We count on their delegation to advocate for and bring climate and nutrition action higher in the national political agenda. This event will inspire you, I hope, to act for the healthier and the more sustainable world. We look forward to receiving your feedback on how best we can support you on the road to COP28 and beyond. So my sincere appreciation to all speakers and participants today. So thank you very much. I need to apologize that I may need to leave a little bit earlier for another event for closing remark. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Aylan, and thank you for being here, because we know it's a busy time. It's a great week this week, but we're all sweating, running around. But also thank you for supporting us. And you just came and you are coming with a fresh mind and ready to take on all our initiatives. So thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank our host, the Scaling Up to Nutrition Movement. And you see, this is actually a beautiful room. If I remember correctly, in this room, I think Lev Tolstoy was writing some of his books. So it was there's a great history. And it's a small room, but actually when you speak, just pay attention to the fact that there are 160 people listening to you online. So thank you. And now, again, I'd like to thank Egypt for the great leadership. And I'd like to now invite Dr. Hossam Abdel Ghaffar, who is a spokesperson of the Ministry of Health and Population in Egypt, without whom we would not be here, correct?
Sorry.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I'm very happy to be with you here with all these esteemed guests and speakers. Let me say in a very direct and straightforward, it's now well known the effect of climate on nutrition and health. It started in COP26, then COP27, and it will continue in COP28. The direct relation between climate, nutrition, and health. Just let me remind you of one example. We were discussing 2 days ago about the diabetes in Africa. We have almost 25 million African citizens who are complaining from diabetes. And this number is projected to increase in 2045 to 55 million. We all know the source of diabetes, and it's a genetic disease, but you cannot underestimate the diet, the regimen on diabetes. And if it is not available, nobody will follow. If he doesn't know, he will not follow. If the climate change affects that kind of diet and food for the African people, nobody will follow. And this is only diabetes. So our target in this initiative that we can include all the stakeholders in the planning and policy making towards climate and nutrition actions. We can implement evidence-based intervention linked with credible data gathering and analysis mechanism. We can achieve a time-bound required progress in both climate and nutrition goal. We can and we will identify and address the gap needed areas and working on make it happen to close those gaps. We can scale of the problem. Climate change and nutrition are complex and very, very difficult problem that will require comprehensive and coordinated response. We can overcome the lack of resources. We can reallocate the budget, and we need to reallocate the budget. That's what we can do and we have to do. What we did in Egypt last 4 months that we already launched our national nutrition strategy. And we are in the process of telling it to our people in Egypt, then to our brother in Africa. This is how we are going to work for the next coming 5 years on our national nutrition strategies with the help of all our partners inside and outside Egypt. We can achieve what we need to achieve. If we didn't do that, I'm afraid one day we will reach the point where we cannot. So before we cannot, I hope we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdel Ghaffar. Thank you for reiterating the fact that not only we can, but we will. And I recognize that Egypt is walking its talk, and Egypt has just passed a regulation to eliminate industrial trans fat. It's an important step towards food system transformation. So we trust that this change is going to affect the whole food system. And now really we're going to go to the central part of this event, which is telling you a bit more what ICANN is and what ICANN can do. So I'm very happy to have here Nancy Aburto, who is the Deputy Director of the Food and Nutrition Division of FAO. And Nancy will give an overview of ICANN, the pathways and the importance of the integrated climate and nutrition action. Nancy, please.
Thank you, Francesco. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies, gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to be joining you here in Geneva this afternoon. And good morning and good evening, good night to those of you connected online. We're glad to have you. We're here today to talk about climate change and nutrition, two extremely important topics in the context of Agenda 2030, two topics that are often talked about separately. But we really need to bring these together because together, climate change and malnutrition are two of the greatest barriers to sustainable development today. So starting with climate change, the most recent reports from the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have shown the indisputable evidence that climate change is destroying our land and water resources, crops and animal species, it's pushing people into forced migration, and it's driving conflict and hunger. And if we don't take urgent action, we'll have as many as 250,000 additional premature deaths per year by 2030. We will also see more than 100 million additional people pushed into extreme poverty. While at the same time, malnutrition is affecting every single country in the world. There are more than 820 million people who are undernourished, 2 billion or more individuals suffering from micronutrient deficiency, and nearly 700 million adults that are suffering from obesity, while undernutrition continues to be an underlying cause in nearly half of all child deaths in children under the age of 5. So these two challenges, it is not an overstatement to say they're two of the greatest challenges that are facing us today. But though they appear to be separate, they are intrinsically interconnected. And this provides us an opportunity because tackling these challenges of climate change and malnutrition simultaneously gives us one solution to those two barriers to sustainable development. So FAO, with our ICANN partners, we've been looking at how we can do this. We've been compiling the evidence around the pathways by which climate and nutrition outcomes are interconnected. And what we found is very exciting because there is a wealth of evidence across agri-food systems, water systems, social protection systems, and health systems that show that there is an impact of each of these systems on both nutrition and climate are impacting these systems as well. That means there is potential across all of these systems to be both climate smart and nutrition sensitive so that we can have healthy diets, we can have safe food, we can have clean water, we can have strong coping mechanisms when shocks occur, and we can have less illness. And all of this from systems that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that are protecting biodiversity, protecting and preserving our natural resources, and supporting positive coping mechanisms. And with this, we can also see a wealth of actions within each of those systems. And that's what's so exciting, that we know that there are a number of actions that are already being undertaken. And what we need to do is bring those to scale. Because if we do that, we can indeed reach the potential of having systems that are climate smart and nutrition sensitive. But ladies and gentlemen, we have yet to reach that potential. And that's where we turn to the government of Egypt and thank them for their leadership and forward thinking in bringing forward the initiative on climate action and nutrition that was launched at the COP27. The initiative on climate action and nutrition is here to foster collaboration, to accelerate transformative action, to address those priorities of climate change and malnutrition simultaneously. It's a timely initiative indeed. It's multi-sectorial, it's multi-stakeholder, and it is a global flagship. We're here as the ICANN to catalyze, mobilize, connect, and advocate for those integrated actions for climate and nutrition. And how do we want to do that? We hope to accomplish this through articulating clearly the advantage to thinking about these two challenges to sustainable development together. We want to build strong alliances across the nutrition and the climate communities. We want to develop and share that evidence base, that we're digging into on those integrated actions for nutrition and climate. And we want to strengthen existing efforts and take action to address gaps. Now, these final 2 points, I think Lawrence is going to dive into a bit more deeply. But we hope that over the course of the rest of this evening's event, you will be inspired to join ICANN so that we can catalyze, mobilize, connect, and advocate for integrated climate and nutrition action. Because together we can realize the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. So I would like to continue this program with Lawrence Haddad. You all know Lawrence. He's the Executive Director of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and he's going to tell us some facts and figures. So where do we start from? Because that will help us understand how much we need to do to get there.
Thank you, Francesco. Is the mic on? Yep. Great. And sir, can I just ask you just to scoot a little bit over to the left because I can't see the screen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. So first of all, I'd like to join everyone else on the panel and thank Dr. Bilgha for Egypt's leadership. Francesco's quite right. We wouldn't be here without you. Thank you. I'd also like to thank WHO for being a really important leader in this space, entrenching ICANN within Attach. That's wonderful. I'd thank FAO for great leadership on this. I'd also like to thank UN Nutrition and SUN, who've been really good partners as well. I'd like to thank FCDO for your support and enthusiasm for this. There are kind of three propositions that ICANN depends on. And we're sort of in the process of testing these three propositions. The first proposition is, and Nancy, I think the paper that FAO is preparing will confirm this proposition, but the first proposition is integrating climate and nutrition can accelerate both faster than if we didn't integrate them. So integration is not integration for its own sake, it's to accelerate both of these things faster. And I think I think the evidence is there, the conceptual links are there. I think we're fine. The second proposition is that the decision-making infrastructure that people in government, in business, in the UN, in civil society, that decision-making infrastructure is kind of stacked against integration, right? And I'm going to present some evidence. I think it's tantalizing because it's preliminary, it's not quite confirmed yet, but I wanted to share with you some evidence that I think will support that proposition. And the third proposition, which we haven't tested yet, is that tracking the state of this integration from the baseline through to 2030 will serve as one stimulus to the kinds of things Nancy was talking about, a stimulus to incentivize, leverage, catalyze, connect action that is integrated between climate and nutrition. So if I could have the first slide, please. Under the leadership of, and this is a very complicated, lots of text in this slide, don't expect you to absorb any of it really. I just want you to see that there are 20 indicators of this decision-making infrastructure that we are tracking. So the headings are from the government of Egypt, who said, we want you to track implementation, capacity building, policy, and investments. So for example, how much of the Green Climate Fund, one of the primary ways of investing in climate action, how many of those investments have nutrition linked to them? I think it's very, very little. We're working on the numbers now, but I think it's going to be very, very little. How many, what do we want that number to be by 2030? 5%? 10%? On the other side, how many national nutrition plans meaningfully engage with climate? Again, I think it's going to be very, very few. So these are the kinds of things we will be establishing a baseline for and tracking. Next, please. When we do the baseline work, it's not going to be, is climate mentioned, if it's a nutrition document or policy document, is climate mentioned in the preamble in a kind of a throwaway way? That's not meaningful integration, right? So we have to establish different levels of integration. Level 1 is no integration, no connection. Level 4 is deep integration. You've thought about it, you've looked at the actions, you developed an action plan, you know how you're going to resource it, and you're pretty confident it's going to accelerate nutrition outcomes and climate action. So that's what we're in the process of doing for these 20 indicators, allocating level 1 through level 4 to these 20. Next, please. We've done it for 4 indicators, and I have to thank my colleague, Catherine Locke and Jess Colston, who've been doing a lot of this work. Here we've picked 4 indicators, one from each of those subheadings that I mentioned earlier. It's preliminary because we haven't had a chance to go through all the documents. So the first one, 50 NDCs, nationally defined contributions. These are the emission roadmaps of every country. How many of those include nutrition-related actions? Level 4, remember, is the highest, most integrated. Level 1 is no integration. 68% of the 50 we've reviewed so far, no integration, right? I was quite shocked to see that. Look at the Global Nutrition Report, which is close to my heart. It tracks 434 commitments in the nutrition space. 1% of those is an integrated action on climate and nutrition. 95% of them don't mention climate at all. I was, again, shocked by that. Look at the third one, number of country food-based dietary guidelines that are mostly focused on nutrition, right? And health. How many of those include climate considerations when it comes to recommendations of food? 70% of them don't mention climate at all. And then investments. The number, so this is private sector investments. We have a lot of public sector and multilaterals. But look at the World Benchmark Alliance tracks 350 companies on their ability to, whether they score well on nutrition and sustainability. None of those 350 companies, none of them score well on nutrition and sustainability. So to me, this says if these numbers hold up as we do more and more dietary-based guidelines, more and more NDCs, if these numbers hold up, and if they're similar for the other 16 indicators, it's bad news and it's good news. It's bad news that we start from a very low base, but it's good news that we have a lot of opportunity to move forward. Next, please, my final slide, Francesco. So those of you who know me know I like imagery because I like numbers, but imagery is sometimes much more powerful. And I think these numbers can serve as a mirror. Where are we? Where are we in this this effort to integrate climate and nutrition? Next one, please. It can also serve as a beacon. Where do we want to be? What are the targets we want for 2030? How many food-based dietary guidelines do we want to refer to climate? How many national nutrition plans do we want to have climate in? How many Green Climate Fund investments do we want to refer to nutrition? And finally, it's a spotlight because it will show which countries, which businesses, which agencies, which organizations, who is doing a really fantastic job of integrating these two and what can we learn from them. So thank you, Francesco, back to you.
There's a commitment to the 26th COP in Glasgow, ATTACH, which is the Alliance for Transformative. It is on, yeah. The Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. Yes, that was the other one. It was not on. Okay, so again, Chris Carter, head of the Human Development Department of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK. And the UK has been instrumental to set up and launch ATTACH, which is the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. And we would like to hear from you, Chris, what you expect from ICANN. How can we get more commitments on the climate and nutrition space? And do you think that we can use also some of our forthcoming summit to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Francisco. The mic's working, right? Firstly, let me add my thanks to all partners, my thanks to Lawrence's, and particularly to WHO and Egypt for this initiative, following on from COP26 and taking it to COP27, which was really important. We are about to go to a panel, so we will change things up, but I was asked to talk about, I think, very practically what ICANN can achieve. And I was very happy to talk about that because I believe very strongly that we need to take practical action and really think hard about what change we can make in the short term, as well as know the long term. Let's start though with our primary goals. Just to remind everyone, we are committed to a world which is free from hunger and malnutrition by 2030, to a world that is kept to 1.5 degrees, and one with restored and protected natural resources, biodiversity, and ecosystems. Now, as I say that, we're all aware of the enormous challenge, and we've heard from others, Nancy in particular, on the trajectory we're on, and it's definitely not that one. What I would stress is that climate change is inducing malnutrition right now. I've just been listening to Her Excellency, the Minister for Health for Malawi, talking about the cyclone and the flooding. And one of the #1 issues was the impact, negative impact on nutrition. It was so interesting to hear that as a key, one of the key challenges they're now facing. I mean, I don't need to remind everyone that this is just the beginning. We are, as climate change increases, the impacts are going to increase. I would just say as well that food systems are making it harder to secure planetary health, not easier. They are the greatest cause of terrestrial biodiversity loss and contribute 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. 1/3, food systems. Okay, so that's the context. I've got 4 suggestions to take you through very quickly. So the first one is around climate resilient health systems with the capacity to respond to climate change impacts on nutrition. And what we think is that we should harness the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate Change and Health, ATTACH, to help and ensure governments include climate-sensitive malnutrition risks when conducting health vulnerability and adaptation assessments, developing national health adaptation plans, or building climate-informed health early warning systems. So we can start that right now, and we should. Secondly, going beyond those preparations, ICANN can support resilient service delivery to ensure access to nutrition services during climate emergencies and shocks. And I mentioned the recent one in Malawi. We think we should use the new Child Nutrition Fund to scale up the coverage of detection, prevention, and treatment services for acute malnutrition. And I can say more about the Child Nutrition Fund if people don't know about it. We think services will save children's lives from climate change and ensure WHO's 2030 model is not realized. The third area, and this is around resilient, sustainable, and nutritious food systems that deliver win-win diets for people's and planetary health. And again, we've heard about that. We think ICANN should harness the UN Food Systems Summit stocktake that's coming up, but other relevant convenings, and there are many, so that national food system transformation pathways include actions that promote production and consumption of nutritious foods in line with their own cultures and identities. And the fourth area, we think ICANN should focus in on the IFIs and the climate funds, really to push them and ensure, and I think it's an open door, that ensure finance and technical assistance is there, that's required to improve food systems, delivers the co-benefits for climate and nutrition. And again, that's come through from what we've heard from the panel. So an example of that, a very practical example, is supporting increased production for climate resilient vegetables and fruit. We can do that. These are just 4 ideas. We have quite a few, but no time to go through them all. But actually, we're quite keen to, and we're all keen to hear from everyone on what ICANN could be doing. And there's a huge amount of expertise in the partnership and in this room. I really feel that ICANN's work is going to be critical. And it's really come out strongly, even from what we've heard already. We're very pleased with the progress that already has been made. These ideas are not to say that ICANN's not already working on them. We've seen progress on ICANN's narrative, the messages, and the engagement on COP28, 2 plan reports and targets that we've heard about, and best practices. So we hope that these products will be the beginning of long-term engagement and support for policymakers, and it is going to be long-term. And we particularly want all of our focus to be on countries that are most vulnerable to the climate-induced malnutrition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And clearly there are a number of new ideas on the table, but it's also interesting to hear that you already are looking at how to implement those ideas, and the availability of the funds is going to be critical for countries who need to make sometimes hard decision on what to prioritize in their context. So again, I'd like to join me in thanking this panel for this great introduction. Thank you. And I'd like to invite maybe if you don't mind sitting there, and I'd like to invite the next panel. Some of them will be sitting with us in person. Some of them will be connected virtually. So let me invite Dr. Azucena Dayanirang and Dan Irvin to sit here at the table. And then we should have online Dr. Mira Shekhar and George Griffin. Unfortunately, we're not able to have Dr. George Campbell from Zimbabwe, was also scheduled to be with us. And I'm also happy to announce that we have 200 participants listening to us online. So is Mira there?
Yes, I'm here, Francesco. Do you hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, we can hear loud and clear. Thank you very much, Mira. Mira Shekhar is the global lead for health, nutrition, and population at the World Bank. She's joining us virtually from Washington, DC. Mira, the World Bank is not new to this topic, because already in 2019, you wrote a blog explaining why climate change and malnutrition must be tracked together. But we would really like to hear from you today. She's still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. No, because suddenly I saw the screen coming off. So one of you've seen that Lawrence said that one of the proposed indicators is actually the financial indicator. As it's a value of the World Bank loans that are supporting both climate and nutrition actions. So, Mira, can the World Bank assess the value of their climate nutrition portfolio? Is that feasible? Is it already done? On the pipeline to be done? Do you have numbers for us? Over to you.
Thank you, Francesco. You always have the easiest questions for me. I appreciate that. And a big thank you before I say anything else to Egypt for their leadership, as well as to WHO and the Sun Movement on this. I must say, I really like the acronym. I'm sorry if you can't see my video. I've turned it on from this side. I don't know what more I can do. Has it changed in any way?
Unfortunately, yes, now we can see you. Wonderful.
Okay, wonderful. Great. So again, a big thank you. And to say that I do really like the acronym I CAN, but I like even more we can, because this is really a question of collaborative action across sectors, across partners, across governments, and so on and so forth. So let's think about how we can move towards a we can strategy. As far as the World Bank's role on this issue, we are working in what some of us refer to as the syndemic of undernutrition, obesity, and climate change. These three things together, as many of the previous speakers have said, they're so closely interlinked. And if you want to find out more, there's lots more on the Lancet Commission on Obesity that talked about these things. Within this space, the bank works in three general areas. One is around analytics, and Chris Carter mentioned many analytics that need to be done. I'll come to some of those that are being done. Second area is around policy dialogue and TA, technical assistance. Again, there's a lot going on in this space. And the third area is around investments. And as you know, the bank is one of the largest investors in the food and nutrition space. I cannot say that everything is entirely climate sensitive, because much of the investments happened earlier before this thing, but certainly the movement towards that. And I'll give you some idea of how that is being done. In terms of analytics, for every country, the bank develops something called the Country Climate and Development Reports, CCDRs. And this is a core diagnostic that helps governments to prioritize the actions that are most impactful to reduce greenhouse gases, but also delivering on development goals. So not just the nutrition goal, but the other goals as well. So this is across the board. In addition to that, and I think Chris asked for this, climate health and vulnerability assessments are being done in every country, as well as climate health and economic valuation. We love acronyms at the bank. So CCDRs, CHVAs, CHEVs, all being done at a big scale in almost every country. As well as some analysis of agriculture and health sector carbon footprint prints as well. And just to give you an idea of the kinds of additional analytics that are being done, as you know, the bank developed the investment framework for nutrition in 2017. We're now updating that to include, among other things, the new evidence, but on some of the maternal interventions, small quantity lipid supplements, as well as the climate-related interventions as well. The bank is doing a whole lot of work. Our agriculture team is working extensively, and this was on Nancy's slide as well, on food loss and waste. We know that food loss and waste is actually one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emission. And just as an example, in Nigeria, if we were to reduce food loss and waste just at the transport or handling stage, you could reduce greenhouse gases by 27%. Similarly, in Rwanda, a 50% reduction of food loss at the farm stage will reduce greenhouse emissions by 23%. So huge potential to do more. And we are working with governments to, on the policy side, to look at what are the trade-offs between poverty reduction, food and nutrition security, as well as climate, as well as, and I think the gentleman from Egypt mentioned that repurposing of agricultural subsidies, so we can repurpose them towards being more climate friendly, but also much more nutrition friendly. And that includes a database on sugar sweetened beverages that we've just launched a few weeks ago. And so let me end by saying, you asked if we can estimate whether bank investments are climate friendly or not. So every single investment that is happening now is required to estimate what we call climate co-benefits. And there's a very, very clear methodology that's been laid out for that. So let me stop there with that, with a big thank you. And just a gentle question to the team here. I see that you included the World Bank in that, but there are other IFIs that perhaps need to be in this space as well. And perhaps before you come up with an indicator, you might want to be sure that everybody is able to measure it and report on it and be willing to do so. From the bank side, I think we can. We can. Over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mira. And we know that the commitment of the World Bank is actually going to increase. We met with Juan Pablo Uribe this morning, and he said, you know, this number is actually going to go up. So that's a very interesting commitment. And now I will address my second question to Dr. Azucena Dayarinirang. She's the Assistant Secretary and Executive Director of the National Nutrition Council, and also some focal point of the government of the Philippines. And I'd like to ask Dr. Dayarinirang how your government is addressing climate change and nutrition through joint actions. And you were here a couple of days ago to also talk in the same room about obesity actions. So I'd be interested to hear what is the connection there. Thank you.
The Philippines possesses an abundant and diverse biological resources, with agricultural sector contributing to 14% of the gross domestic product of the country. However, due to climate change, it has impacted the agricultural productivity in the past decades, with weather events, extreme weather events like increasing cyclone, and then floods, and then other calamities. It has damaged around $5 billion in agriculture, to the agriculture sector. So in fact, Philippines also is ranked number one in the world risk index in 2022. And furthermore, the current crisis that we have led to the rising consumer food prices, no? So making the marginalized population more vulnerable. And in 2021 National Nutrition Survey, unfortunately, 30% of Filipino households experience moderate to severe food insecurity, and malnutrition continues to be public health significance, with about 3 million under 5 children already stunted. So what are the immediate actions of the government? Well, the government of the Philippines formulated certain policies. In particular, the Philippine government formulated the climate change expenditure tagging. This is to mainstream climate change in both the national and subnational budget and planning processes, which started in 2017. And then the government also increased its budget on climate change adaptation and mitigation activities from $5 billion in 2022 to $8 billion in 2023, which is this year. This amounts to equivalent to 8.8% of the total national budget. And the strategies include actually sustainable energy as well as food security initiatives. Now, the integration of an emphasis of food security within the Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition actually is a significant step in addressing the interrelated issues of climate change and nutrition. So the plan puts emphasis on strengthening nutrition-sensitive interventions that enable and the building of sustainable food systems. The other one is we have recognized the urgent call that the Philippines this year, with our Nutrition Month campaign, this is celebrated every July with the theme Making Healthy Diets More Affordable to All, calls for actions in improving access to affordable and healthy diets. And this is to reduce, of course, malnutrition and hunger in the country. Now, the campaign strategies will involve, but not limited to, consumers who will support the improvements in the levels of diet quality, but also with our policymakers, legislators, program managers, and in increasing availability of nutritious diets. And moving forward, we are pushing for the strengthening and expansion of relevant agencies in the government. Like, for example, my agency, the National Nutrition Council, making it to a National Nutrition Commission with an expanded role and putting it on the highest level of governance, which is under the Office of the President, no longer an attached agency to the Ministry of Health. Because we know for a fact that malnutrition is multifactorial in causality. Therefore, this is not about health alone, but this is a multi-sectoral concern. So just recently, on May 18, the President of the Philippines reconstituted the Interagency Task Force in Zero Hunger, which I am was appointed as the co-chairperson, and this will, the initiatives that I have mentioned we can actually reach our dreams of having resilient food systems and sustainable food systems, as well as food secure future for all Filipinos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diana. And actually, you have really touched the heart of the problem. So, what we want to see is affordable, healthy diet from a sustainable food system. And that's really the joint agenda of improving health, improving the environment, and improving livelihoods in a situation where, food security is an issue and we have, important vulnerability. So that transformation is really critical. So thank you very much for that. And now let's listen to Dan Irvin. Dan is the Global Director of Health and Nutrition of World Vision International. And I'd like to ask Dan how you think, how you are working on the nexus of the different systems, and are there any success stories you would like to share? And what would you see as opportunities for ICANN to leverage?
Thank you very much, Francesco. And let me first add my thanks to the government of Egypt for catalyzing this movement, and to WHO for organizing the discussion this evening, and my colleagues at SUN for hosting the meeting here. Thank you all to all the participants, those of you online. We really appreciate your attention. As someone who spent the first half of his career working in the agriculture sector and the latter half working in health and nutrition, I had a difficult time looking at the excellent 4 pathways that Nancy was sharing and discerning where I should localize my comments for this important dialogue this evening, because it's really a complex ecosystem with literally hundreds or thousands of interventions that are called for, many of which the previous speakers have been alluding to. But having reflected on it a bit, I came with pretty strong determination to wanting to talk about the issue of gender and transformative gender action and its relation to climate and nutrition. And I'm first delighted to point out that the ICANN narrative does a pretty good job of prioritizing transformative gender in the narrative. Really delighted to see that. So that's a good start for us. But what does that gender priority then mean to all of us here today? The narrative, let me quote a little bit, it points out that 2/3 of women and girls globally are affected by undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies. This is not new. We know this, that women and girls experience the greatest burden of these issues. The report also points out, tragically, that women and girls are 14 times more likely to be killed by climate-related disasters, which is incredible. In addition to those points, there are a lot of descriptive statistics about the relationship of women and girls and nutrition and food security and climate. We know that women and girls represent 60% of the food insecure people in the world. At the same time, women and girls represent 75% of unpaid labor in the world. So many inequities that we need to wrestle with. Typically, these statistics are describing the burden of malnutrition, the inequitable burden of malnutrition on women and girls. But what we need to think about, which we need to address, and that needs to be reversed conclusively. But what we need to think about when we talk about transformative actions for women and girls is empowering their agency as fully half of the world's workforce to produce more and to produce better and to be able to control their nutrition situation themselves in partnership with the rest of us. Okay, so when we talk about transformative action, it's not just about making sure that women and girls are well nourished and protected and resilient, but rather that they have agency to control their lives and make the world a better place moving forward. An example of what this work looks like is some work that we've been doing in South Sudan. In South Sudan, by empowering women and girls to have better access and control of resources, agri-food resources and others, by empowering them to have leadership roles with greater responsibility and decision-making, by increasing their opportunities through collective bargaining power, by working with men to address the sociocultural barriers that they typically implement, by training civil society and government stakeholders on women's legal entitlements and their enforcement, we've seen some big changes in the situation, including a 40 percentage point increase in household diet diversity, equalized access to agricultural services, a 30 percentage point increase in control of livelihood assets, and a 60 percentage point increase in profitable income generating activities. There's really interesting evidence also about the impact in sub-Saharan Africa specifically on agricultural production that keeping girls in school will have alone. These impacts, so the impacts I'm describing are largely in, production outcomes, but they resonate as well in health and nutrition outcomes. I've been promoting the gender nutrition issue for quite a number of years now. And what I've found is that as I'm speaking at CFS, or as I'm speaking within our nutrition community or our food security community, there is a lot of agreement, there's a lot of sympathy, but at the end of the day, transformative actions for women and girls is not their business. So if we say improving access to credit for women and girls, if we say keeping girls in school, it's not that community's job. And so it ends up falling through the cracks, which is a real tragedy. That needs to change. I think we all collectively need to identify where the evidence-based interventions really lie, whether they are directly within our sector, or if we perceive them to be outside in somebody else's sectors, and work collectively to make those improvements. One thing that I would like to see and recommend for ICANN moving forward is to rally stakeholders together to identify or create a cadre of experts in gender and nutrition who can work alongside, who can embed in, work alongside of governments to help them make their policies gender nutrition sensitive and really begin to move the needle on this issue. I'm very proud that my organization has recently seconded a gender nutrition expert to the Scaling Up Nutrition movement to help work on that kind of activity. And we will continue to support that way. So thank you for letting me speak to this particular issue tonight.
Thank you, Dan. And of course, it's really critical to call the attention to gender and women as those who produce food often are responsible for the distribution of food in the family, and those who often do not get the food they need for their own life and that of the children sometimes they bear. So absolutely, the gender lens needs to be considered in the design of the intervention. So thank you for reminding us. And let me now bring another colleague who is online, and this is Jeffrey Griffin. Jeffrey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. And so Jeffrey is the senior coordinator. We can also see you. That's wonderful. Is a senior coordinator of the Global Environment Facility Coordination Unit in FAO. Jeff, you are coordinating the FAO's engagement with the Global Environment Facility, which includes climate financing. So from your perspective, what are the opportunities for the climate and nutrition joint actions? Could you share any recommendation to integrate nutrition in the climate portfolio?
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Francesco. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. Since 2006, FAO has worked with the GEF to mobilize over $1 billion in grant resources and leveraged $8 billion in co-financing to support over 130 countries. We need integrated solutions to address effectively the climate crisis and the interlinked crises of malnutrition, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem degradation. Increasingly, FAO and key partners like the GEF are taking more integrated approaches to tackling the complex challenges at the nexus between agri-food systems and the environment, particularly climate change. Colleagues, the good news is we can, to echo the theme of the event today, we can improve nutrition and mitigate and adapt to climate change. It's a triple win solution. FAO's work on nutrition within our work on agri-food systems transformation can deliver results and advance our work on climate change, biodiversity, food security, and public health. Allow me to describe two examples of our growing area of work at the intersection with nutrition. First, in Mali, our Sustainable and Productive Landscapes project will address nutrition and environmental challenges by promoting an agroecological transition. In this project, improving nutrition is a key entry point for local communities to increase resilience to climate change and reduce vulnerability. A key project objective is to increase household dietary diversity by 20%. We will use a tool to monitor the performance of agroecological work and identify ways to improve nutrition in target communities. Project-supported agro-pastoral field schools will also include nutrition training. In another Jeff-funded Dryland Sustainable Landscapes Impact Program, led by FAO with other partners in 11 countries worldwide, FAO embeds nutrition in its approach to integrated landscape management. We do this by promoting sustainable agricultural intensification through the diversification of agricultural production. We promote the use of underutilized nutrient-dense plants that are also drought-tolerant, nitrogen-fixing, and soil stabilizing. The program increases resilience, food security and productivity, and agrobiodiversity while mitigating land degradation and climate change. It is an integrated response that looks at people, climate, and the environment. This is just a sample of our current work. I'm pleased to say that we have even more opportunities to work together to incorporate nutrition in our GEF work. The 8th replenishment of the Global Environment Facility, or GEF-8, operates under a healthy people, healthy planet framework, putting human health and well-being at the center. With more than $5 billion pledged, it's the biggest replenishment in the history of the GEF. GEF-8 is an opportunity to accelerate climate action, but we must work together to make sure that these actions enhance access to healthy diets, create more resilient livelihoods, improve ecosystem health, and address malnutrition. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful discussion ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, because you're also reminding us what actually we mean by climate. There are different dimensions there, and you mentioned biodiversity. You know, it's sustainability is about greenhouse gases, it's about water, it's about land, it's about you know, nitrogen and phosphorus use. So and of course biodiversity. So it's complex, but it's good to hear that there are very concrete initiatives to look at them, you know, comprehensively from the production side, and that also that the resources are there for countries to use, and the kind of investment that are needed for that transformation are not marginal. So the fact that they are there is extremely reassuring. So thank you for that. I'm also pleased to say that we have together with us today the representative from Côte d'Ivoire, Dr. Patricia Yobwe Ngoran-Tekli. And Patricia is the advisor to the President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire and Sun Movement Executive Committee member. She's really representing the Western Central Africa. And she's also the government advisor to the Regional Center of Excellence Against Hunger and Malnutrition. And we're very pleased to have Patricia here. Côte d'Ivoire has made a strong statement of support at the ICANN launch in Egypt. And so we would like to hear from you, Patricia.
Merci. Je voudrais dire bonjour à tout le monde et merci d'avoir invité la Côte d'Ivoire. Et je voudrais dire que en venant ici, le vice-président de la République est très bien informé de cet événement parce que c'est lui qui préside le Conseil national pour la nutrition, l'alimentation et le développement de la petite enfance en Côte d'Ivoire.
She would like to thank the audience for inviting her here. And she would like to say as well that the vice president is very well informed this event as the leader of the National Nutrition Council for Nutrition Development and Early Childhood Development.
Et donc, pour vous traduire le soutien de la Côte d'Ivoire à cet événement assez important pour nous. Donc, je voudrais juste rappeler dans quel contexte nous sommes vraiment intéressés par cette initiative ICANN. Vous savez que les défis au niveau continental africain n'échappent pas à la Côte d'Ivoire Et donc, les défis complexes de la faim et de la malnutrition et leur élimination est assujettie à plusieurs facteurs qui sont interdépendants. Donc, en remettant en cause les progrès déjà acquis,
Well, thank you very much. I would like to say that Côte d'Ivoire is no stranger to all the challenges that are associated with climate change and malnutrition. And neither is the whole African continent.
donc je disais qu'il y a de nombreux défis dans le changement climatique et nous savons leur impact sur tout ce que nous pouvons bénéficier avancement dans la situation nutritionnelle et la faim en Afrique et en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, à titre de... Donc, allez-y.
We know all the challenges associated with climate change and hunger in Africa and in Ivory Coast.
Et donc, je vous... D'accord, ok. Je suis tellement engagée que je l'oublie. Alors, il me dit de plus l'oublier. Alors, je voudrais dire qu'en effet, vous savez que tous ces efforts sont difficilement acquis. À quel prix? Quand nous savons que nous devons atteindre les cibles de l'Assemblée mondiale de la santé et que nous faisons d'énormes efforts qui peuvent être remis en cause par cette situation qui est le changement climatique.
All the efforts that we are doing towards achieving the WHO targets are challenged by climate change.
Donc, je disais que la COVID nous a appris à tirer des leçons et à comprendre qu'aujourd'hui, nous devons penser et à la fois les situations d'urgence humanitaire et de développement en élaborant nos plans nationaux de nutrition.
We got the lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic that we need to talk about challenges, that we need to consider challenges of this kind when we establish our national nutrition plans.
Donc, je voudrais simplement citer quelques effets de ce changement climatique, comme vous l'avez dit, sur la sécurité alimentaire, la santé, la protection sociale, l'approvisionnement en eau. Et nous savons que tous ces déterminants, tout ce que je viens de citer, ces secteurs, ont un impact important sur la nutrition.
I would like to quote some of the examples of the impacts of climate change on food security, health, social protection, and water, which are indispensable to a good nutrition.
C'est peut-être un plaidoyer que je fais, parce que je sais qu'il y a en présence ici des partenaires. Et nous devons savoir que la nutrition est un facteur de cohésion sociale. Nous parlons de cohésion sociale dans le sens de la paix et de la résilience de nos populations, de nos communautés, même de nos pays.
We know that nutrition brings social cohesion and resilience amongst our populations, our communities, and our countries.
D'où la nécessité d'une approche globale, systémique, synergique et coordonnée.
Therefore, we need a global, systemic, and coordinated approach to nutrition.
Donc, pour revenir pour la Côte d'Ivoire, vous savez, enfin, peut-être je vous le rappelle, l'engagement du président de la République à un plus haut niveau sur ces deux actions, que ce soit la nutrition et le climat.
You know the commitment of the president of Ivory Coast on these two key topics, which are nutrition and climate.
Et pour cela, 3 grandes actions ont été posées par la Côte d'Ivoire, à savoir conduire la 15e conférence des partis pour la lutte contre la désertification et la sécheresse qui s'est tenue en mai 2022 en Côte d'Ivoire.
So 3 main actions have been put in place by Ivory Coast, including the 15th Conference of Parties for fighting against desertification and drought, which happened in May 2022 in Abidjan.
Et qui aboutit au lancement programme héritage appelé l'action urgente, qui est une action urgente et structurée et coordonnée et qui intègre les enjeux alimentaires nutritionnels.
And led to the launch of the programme Héritage, which is a call for urgent, structured and coordinated action for sustainable development that takes into consideration food and nutrition issues.
La deuxième action que la Côte d'Ivoire a posée, que le président de la République a posée, c'est déclarer l'année de la nutrition. L'année africaine 2022 a été déclarée année de la nutrition avec un accent sur la résilience nutritionnelle et alimentaire et en mettant encore un autre accent qui était le renforcement des systèmes alimentaires, des systèmes de santé et des systèmes de protection sociale.
The second key topic that His Excellency the President has put in place is declaring 2022 the year of African Year of Nutrition, with special focus on reinforcing nutritional resilience, food security, and food systems, health and social protection.
Et la Côte d'Ivoire a participé à un haut niveau au lancement de ICANN qui a eu lieu à la COP 2027 en Égypte. Et nous saluons encore l'OMS et le représentant de l'Égypte ici présent.
And Ivory Coast was part of the launch of ICANN at COP27 through high-level participation, this initiative, which will help link nutrition and climate.
Alors, pour dire qu'on se poserait la question ici, comment accélérer cette collaboration? C'est de ça qu'il s'agit. Tout est bien beau, bien dit, mais comment y aller et accélérer cette collaboration? Surtout, quelles sont les opportunités que nous devons saisir?
Everything is great here. Now, the question I would like to raise is how to accelerate that collaboration, strengthen it, and which opportunities must we seize?
Comment optimiser ces financements? Et donc, pour dire au niveau national, j'allais commencer à dire que nous disposons d'un plan national multisectoriel de nutrition qui intègre au moins 7 secteurs: le secteur de la santé, de l'agriculture, de l'eau, des ressources animales, de l'éducation et l'alphabétisation, de l'assainissement et de l'autonomisation de la femme.
In Ivory Coast, we have a national nutrition plan that includes at least 7 sectors: water, agriculture, women, health,
Eau, assainissement,
water and sanitation,
autonomisation de la femme.
women, autonomization.
D'accord. Et je voudrais dire que ce plan est coordonné par un Conseil national pour la nutrition, l'alimentation et le développement de la petite enfance, placé sous la haute autorité du président de la République.
That plan is coordinated by National Council for Food, Nutrition and Early Childhood Development, which is under the presidency of the Republic.
Et ce plan, sans le vouloir, anticipe aujourd'hui sur la résilience nutritionnelle. Il y a un axe réservé à la résilience nutritionnelle, à relever les défis nutritionnels dans les zones à forte prévalence d'insécurité alimentaire liée aux périodes de soudure, donc au changement climatique.
This plan links to nutrition resilience, especially in areas which suffer the most from the lean season, so areas most impacted by climate change.
Et je voudrais dire que ce plan multisectoriel est financé à partir des ressources domestiques. Il y a un objectif qui a été fixé de 15% de ce plan qui est alloué par le gouvernement ivoirien, l'État de Côte d'Ivoire.
15% of national budget is global national budget is allocated to that plan.
Du coup, global de ce plan, pas de.
15% of the global cost of that plan is allocated by the government.
Je terminerai par dire une autre opportunité qu'on n'a pas laissée, parce que depuis qu'on est informé de cette initiative, les plaidoyers se poursuivent. Et vous savez que la Côte d'Ivoire dispose d'une stratégie nationale sur le climat, qui sont les contributions déterminées, qui offre une opportunité à 5 secteurs, en incluant un objectif d'améliorer la résilience de 5 secteurs, dont le secteur de la santé, le secteur de l'agriculture, de l'eau, de la foresterie et des zones côtières.
So Ivory Coast has a nationally determined contribution, which is an opportunity to advance nutrition and climate in 5 sectors, which are health, water, agroforestry, coastal areas and forestry.
OK, donc juste pour dire qu'il y a un plan d'adaptation aussi qui est en cours d'élaboration, qui va être achevé d'ici la fin de l'année, mais pour dire ces opportunités que offrent ces plans d'adaptation, ces contributions déterminées, nous les saisissons à travers le secteur de l'agriculture qui prévoit renforcer la sécurité alimentaire et la nutrition.
We see the reinforcement of these different topics through agriculture plan, which includes the reinforcing of food security and nutrition.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Goran Tekli. And I think Côte d'Ivoire is really, an example of how you don't have an alternative. You have to tackle climate change and nutrition at the same time, a country which has two emergencies. And of course, the president is taking personally commitment to address both in an integrated plan. I think it's really a very important example, and congratulations for the enormous effort that Cote d'Ivoire is doing in the progress. So, well, I hope that our colleagues, Robin and Jessica, has been able to address some of the comments and questions that were in the chat. I think now we'll go to the final part of this event. So I'd like to again thank our panelists for the conversation, and maybe you can take your seat there. And I'd like to now ask Dr. Omnia El Omrani and Afshan Khan to take place in the front. And I'm particularly pleased to have Dr. El Omrani. She's the COP27 Youth Envoy. And Lina is writing the script is a poet here, and she's really saying something which I really like, and she's saying we need to be good ancestors, and good ancestor for the generation to come. What is a good ancestor? Is someone who makes decisions that prioritize the quality of life for the lives that will come after their own. So we're not doing this for us, but we're doing this for children and grandchildren and their generation to come. So, Dr. Omnia, we would like to hear from you what you would like to see happen at COP28 in the context of climate action and nutrition, and what is the expectation and the role of youth?
Yeah, can you hear? First of all, thank you so much for having me in this very important event. And before I answer your question, I have a small personal story I want to share. So the climate emergency is both a wake-up call to the vulnerability of our food systems and an insight into the ongoing threat that is posed on nutritional security and our collective health. This is quoted from a commentary that I published with a group of amazing medical students back in 2019, right after COP25. We went there to COP to ask the delegates who were attending the conference whether they see the importance of not just food production practices, but dietary change in the climate negotiation process. We had a good response, but insufficient. Around 30 to 40% saw its relevance, but the other group of participants who were in the survey at COP didn't see how important it is. And now, being at COP27, I was so proud to see that the Egyptian COP27 presidency launched an initiative that recognized the importance of nutrition and dietary change in the climate process. And with ICANN, I see it as a one-of-a-kind initiative that really puts in healthy and sustainable diet as a standalone issue. But looking at me as a young person, I see the unmitigated impacts of climate change affecting and leading to acute food insecurity in over 54 million people in my region alone. And at the same time, as a medical doctor, I was trained to see the impacts of malnutrition directly and how detrimental it is on children and adolescent well-being, development, and so on. But this made me see and recognize my responsibility as a young person to call for the integration of climate change and nutrition to transition to sustainable and healthy dietary patterns. Not only do our food systems right now nutritionally unable to sustain us, but they're also one of the greatest drivers of environmental degradation. That is why I see how ICANN aims to leverage the role of nutrition in climate adaptation and mitigation solutions. And this has often been missed in the climate policy and practice space. It also aims to provide aspirational guidance and, most importantly, implementation pathways for countries, institutions, civil society organizations to take it on. And simply, the choices that we make today will either accelerate or reverse the tide of the diet-related chronic diseases that we're seeing, climate change, and biodiversity loss. Yet, positive progress has already been made by young people, specifically young entrepreneurs, innovators, and experts. I know that because as the first youth envoy to the COP27 president, I saw firsthand the concrete solutions that young people were leading. From integrating and incorporating sustainability into dietary guidelines, to pushing schools and universities to procure healthy and nutritional food, from transforming advertising, nudging, as well as behavioral strategies to incentivize the communities and the consumers to make healthy and sustainable food choices. We know that business as usual is not an option, nor in the climate crisis, nor in the food system crisis. We also know that we cannot afford any further delay. We must work together and rise to this challenge. It is a crucial moment. It is the greatest challenge of our time, as we see the burden of climate change on food security mounts. We are at a very important moment for collective decision-making. We have the UN Food System Stock Take coming up. We have the COP28, and this is an opportunity where we can work together, where the key actors, the countries, the institutions, and the young experts work together as natural, as equal stakeholders to really emphasize and integrate climate change and nutrition together. I also commend the WHO, the COP27, as well as the COP28 presidency for always ensuring the integration of voices of young people like myself. But at the same time, our engagement will only be meaningful if our priorities and if our governments are delivering for and with young people. So as young people, we understand the importance of healthy and sustainable diets, the importance of nutrition for the health of our people and our planet. And that is why we have already taken action for the specific interlinked agenda, and we call on you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elomrani. It's refreshing, and we're also comforted by the fact that you think this is something that is worth pursuing with this community. So, you know, we're not going to fail your expectation, I'm sure. And so now we have reached the end of our conversation today, and I'm really happy to give the floor to the newly appointed United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Sun Movement Coordinator, Ms. Afshan Khan, who has also been our host today. So again, thank you very much for hosting us, and the floor is yours, Afshan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having the opportunity to speak to this event, WHO for organizing it, the Egyptian government for initiating it, and to all the panelists and speakers. And I think it's only fitting that where I'm coming from, I sit next to the youth envoy, because I do think this is also going to be the momentum and the future of what we're going to be able to do around aligning the climate and food agenda, as you so eloquently said. So I think we've heard from our respective partners that climate change and malnutrition are amongst the greatest challenges facing humanity and are intrinsically intertwined. By addressing these priorities in an integrated way, we'll optimize some of the efforts towards better sustainable development. We also know that the impacts and exposure of risk factors of climate change and nutrition are not gender neutral, that inequities in access to health and nutrition services, social protection, control over resources, agency, and decision-making power are underlying drivers of malnutrition and climate change. As a result, women and girls are differently exposed and have different abilities to respond or cope with climate shocks. We've seen that climate change is having a huge negative impact on nutrition and food security, and climate variability and associated events are projected to increase rates of childhood undernutrition. And we've also heard that diets and food systems are at the heart of the nutrition climate nexus. The national food systems transformation pathways, if resourced and implemented, can generate multiple benefits for improved nutrition, affordable healthy diets, and better environment. For the Scaling Up Nutrition movement as a country-led and country-driven initiative of 65 countries and 4 Indian states, we see the event today as one that builds on the commitment to promote the synergistic linkages between climate, food systems, and nutrition in some countries to counter malnutrition in all its forms. This very much links to the goal of ICANN to support member states to deliver integrated nutrition and climate change policy and action to simultaneously improve nutrition and trigger transformative action, thus contributing to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda and specifically SDG 2. All of the presenters today, esteemed guests and dear colleagues, your participation in this event, but more importantly, your ideas, what you're going to do around data, evidence, to bring together these two initiatives is going to be critical for the future. And I think the best example came from Dr. Amrani on how young people themselves want to see these issues positioned, linked to a series of things like social entrepreneurship, which I feel will be very important to tackle these challenges, and some of the innovations that are needed at the technical level to build a better agenda. So thank you very much for joining us. And I think look forward to the discussion at the stock-taking movement in July. And we'll need all of the partnerships, as was so eloquently said, amongst member states, amongst young people, civil society, the financing community to reach this agenda together. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Afshan. Thank you, Omnia. And, this brings us to the end. So really, I'd like to thank all the panelists, all the people sitting here in Villa Les Bocages, all the people online. And I think that today we've seen that we can move from an initiative on climate change and nutrition, ICANN, to a worldwide engagement on climate change and nutrition. We can. So let's do it together.